Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good pal, Ty Franck. How you doing today, Ty?
I'm all right.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about one of the masculine, manly man movies of all time, Predator. Big fans of Predator, but we have a very special guest today. Ty, do you want to introduce our special guest?
I mean, he's your good friend. You should introduce him.
I'll introduce him, god darn it. This is my good pal. We've been friends forever. Brett Simmons, the great, great horror director, Brett Simmons, is joining us today to discuss a classic, Predator. How you doing, Brett?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked to be here.
So I'll tell a little story. You know, me and Brett, he's one of my first friends in LA, and how we bonded is we had the same manager at the time, and the manager said he represented Bruce Campbell, and I used to freak out, you know, that he represented Bruce Campbell, and Bruce Campbell had a premiere of a movie that he directed, and I said, you got to get me, and he says, I only have one other client that cares this much about Bruce Campbell and cares about this movie, and it's Brett, and you're gonna love Brett. And me and Brett went to that screening, and Bruce Campbell was there. And it was just a handful of people. We had such a great time. And then we stayed after and just talked about movies for hours. And then we got to do a horror movie together, Husk. And in doing that movie, I think it was the first weekend night, because we shot Saturday. So it was like the first night that we had off, we did a screening of The Thing. And then that's when we became brothers. And when
we were real fast friends over movies, but then Thing really pushed it way over the edge.
Let me tell my Brett Simmons story here. So Brett made a horror movie out of the back and forth joking tweets of two friends of mine, Sam Sykes and Chuck Wendick, who are both writers. Who I've known Sam since he was a kid, like 17 or so, and Chuck and I have been friends since I think like my first book came out. And one day they just started tweeting back and forth jokingly. Like one of them was like talking about having accidentally murdered somebody. And somehow, I need to know how you decided, hey, these tweets are funny, I'm going to make a movie out of this. I need to understand that.
Well, it's actually even worse than that, Ty, because what happened was their thread had already gone viral. I knew nothing about it. And the call that I got was from a producer I'd worked with before, who we had a really great experience together. And he knew that I had a lot of comedy in my bones that hadn't yet made it into my movies. And so he felt like I had a natural combination for like horror comedy. And even though that's not what I didn't even know what it was yet, the call that I got was, hey man, we want to make a movie. It's a horror movie based off a Twitter thread. And I was like, if I didn't know this guy, I would have hung up. It's like, what are you talking about? But then when I saw the thread, I was like, oh my God, there's actually a lot of gold to mine out of this. And we had a great time.
Yeah, it was a little annoying to me that like I had to write a gigantic best-selling book series to have anybody be interested in my shit. These two knuckleheads are just tweeting at each other, and people are like, let's make movies out of it. What the hell, man?
Joking around. I know. And honestly, my first thought was like, is this where we're at now? Is this the stage of film history we're at where we're now making movies off of tweets? This is crazy. But in their case, there was a lot. You can't do that with everybody.
But how did that happen? He pitched you, he told you about Twitter feed, you read it, and then what was the next step from there? You're like, yeah, this could be a movie. And then how do you go from there?
Yeah, well, it was funny because I read the Twitter feed knowing that they wanted to make a movie out of it. And so I'm sitting there going like, where's the story? Where's the story? Where are the beats? Is there enough to fill 3 acts worth of drama and stuff? But it was interesting because the thread immediately started. The whole idea is Sam's like this guy, like, I think I may have murdered somebody. And then check, well, I mean, are you holding a weapon? Are you wearing a mask? And it's really funny, but there is an inherent drama of someone who doesn't know if they're actually killing all these people, and they're like riffing on all these horror tropes, which was hilarious. But I immediately realized, like, that's really the tension of this thing is almost like a werewolf story, or like a horror movie version of Memento, where it's like someone who doesn't necessarily, an unreliable first person narrator or like main character trying to deduce these horrible things that he's ultimately learning he's doing and why. So like, okay, there can be a bit of a mystery. There could be some fun to be had with this. And very quickly felt like it lent itself towards doing a lot with it.
That idea of you keep sort of waking up in the middle of a horrific moment. And not knowing how you got there, not knowing, that part of it I thought was really well done. I think that and the idea that, you're wearing this item that, I'm not going to spoil the whole movie, but you're wearing this item that is causing you to lose track of time and these terrible things happen around you. I thought that was a really interesting way to take what they had done and turn it into an actual plot. Because of course, they weren't doing a plot.
Right.
But I thought it was really well done. And you got to work with a teenage crush of mine. You got to work with Willow. So,
oh yeah,
that was, yeah. No, teenage me was very awesome. Jealous. Yeah.
Oh, that is so funny. She was great. It was funny because, that whole movie came together so quickly. There wasn't really time to like marinate on anything, or you just kind of had to shoot from the hip because the script had to come together fast. Production was coming really fast, and they wanted to be done really quickly. And so it was one of those things where we just kind of blasted out the script just to find interest. And Allison came on board right away because she just loved how funny it was. And then same with Franck. And it was kind of just like, wait, what, are you guys joking me? Like, I couldn't believe and honestly, the movie's funny. It works because of them, because their performances, their chemistry, those guys are superstars. So yeah, without her, I don't know if it would have worked.
Well, can I ask, what was the budget on that movie?
Oh God. I'll tell you, I can tell you that it was about double, maybe almost 3 times more than it was when that was pitched to me than it was when I got the set. We got to say like, hey, so it's different now. And the movie changed a lot, but I think it was like $1.5 million, $2 million.
Yeah. Which, by the way, it's an amazing, you can shoot anything at that price anymore.
My God, I know. Isn't it true?
Yeah.
When Wes and I did Husk was supposed to be a $3 million movie that ended up being 1.7.
Well, it might have. Some of that money might have found its way in other pockets.
Yeah, let's just say
it was kind of hard to. Exactly. It was probably actually like a couple $100,000 movie.
I'm honestly really glad you jumped in because I was trying to find the delicate way to phrase that. It's like, we may have actually made it for a lot less than that. On paper, that's what people will say the movie cost. But my first day it says like, so how many Technocrane days can we have? And they're like, none. It's like, wait, hold on, guys.
Wait a minute, this is a $3 million movie.
I know. So lunch going to be like peanut butter sandwiches, or what's going on?
We could buy a ladder for the cameraman to stand on. That's like a techno crane.
And then we'll just swing him from a rope that we'll put over the branch of this tree. But but what was funny was we did. That was in 2009 when we made Husk, and that felt like I had a lot more budget on that movie than it did on You Might Be the Killer. So, which was funny because You Might Be the Killer was 2018 was when we shot that, and it felt. But just to your point, you're right. $1.5 million does not mean the same thing that it meant like 10 years ago.
That's less than a quarter of what we would spend to shoot a 42-minute episode of our TV show, and you shot an entire movie for that.
Yes, we did. But I'll tell you what, when I got to walk around you guys' sets and everything, that was just like heaven to me. I was like, I cannot, this is just like, I want to live here.
I'm impressed that, and we're getting ready to talk about a movie that we're all impressed by, so this is a good transition. I'm just impressed that there are still filmmakers in the world who can tackle a problem with that little amount of money and actually make a thing that is good. Because it seems like nowadays, the era of the $25 million movie is just dead. It's just dead. Nobody does that anymore. Jordan Peele's doing that. Blumhouse is doing that. But that's pretty much their only ones left, right? Now everything has to be 120 million, 250 million. And I miss the days when a guy could have a good idea. He could scrape a little financing together, make a movie, you're talking about Memento a little earlier, something like, Nolan's first movie or what's the one that I was just trying to think of? The movie about the formula.
Oh, Pi.
Pi. Thank you. Yeah. I was actually Aronofsky. I was at an event with him a couple of months ago, and we had lunch together, and I asked him, how did you make that movie? And he was like, me and some of my friends put in like $30,000, and I had a camera, and I just shot this movie for like $30,000. That's a movie that I bought the VHS of it when it came out, and I was forcing everyone to watch it. I was forcing all of my friends to watch that movie. And the idea that you can be a filmmaker, you can scrape together $30,000 and a camera, you can shoot a movie that is that good.
Yeah.
I miss that. I miss being able to go to the video store and find those movies on the shelf, So my hat's off to you, man.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I think it just boils down to story. And I mean, I think it's more luck. I can't take as much credit as maybe I'm given, but I relate. I love the energy of a movie that's scraped together. You feel you feel the creativity, you feel the drive, you feel the inspiration in it. And more money does not necessarily always amount to better, and I think that I just always feel like creativity thrives in limitation.
All righty. So, Predator. Brett, when is the first time you saw Predator? When was the first time you heard about Predator? When was the first time you saw it? And what was that impression like?
So here's the quick version of it is I was too much of a wimp to watch horror movies in the 80s because I was a kid. Predator came out in 87. I was born in 82, so I was like,
that's your favorite thing now.
Yes.
How did
100%.
How did that happen? What you were? Go ahead.
I was just my imagination has been too vivid since forever. So horror movies just were a bad idea for me when I was a kid because I was already like just freaking myself out over stupid stuff. Like I read scary stories all the time, probably because I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies and I wanted to get my fix somewhere, and it was bad. But what's funny is my dad loved John Carpenter's movies. He loved Halloween and he loved Predator, but he would watch movies at night when I went to bed because I wasn't allowed to watch them and he was afraid of freaking me out. And I remember him coming back from Blockbuster. God bless the Blockbuster days. He came back with Predator 2. So Predator 2 was the first time I was aware of like, what is that? And he was explaining it to me. He's like, it's an alien. He's like hunting humans and he's in LA, but it's rated R. You can't watch it yet. And interesting, it like became forbidden fruit for me. And so I was aware of Predator 2 first, but then when I saw the 2 on it, I was like, well, I can't do that. So I think it was like high school, I want to say, was the first time I watched the original Predator. So it was like late 90s that I finally watched Predator, and I couldn't believe what I had been deprived from my whole life up till that point. I loved it. Instantly, I loved it.
Please tell me you did not watch it the first time on terrible pan and scan VHS.
I absolutely did. I'm sorry to say. I wish I didn't. As soon as I said 90s, you knew it. But yeah, I pan and scan. But that was what was crazy was when I was in college and DVDs were like, it's like, what was that? I'm just dating myself way too much. But, late 90s, early 2000s when DVD was like really hitting hard and all the movies were getting re-released. When I saw Predator widescreen for the first time, I felt like I was rediscovering it. I was like, this is like so much more cinema than I already thought it was. It's brilliant.
What about you, Ty?
I saw Predator at the theater. So I'm a little older than Brett. So I was in high school when Predator came out. And my parents, as you know, were crazy religious wackos. So I wasn't allowed to watch any movie that had violence or sex or whatever. But I just did anyway because I was such a cinephile. So I would sneak out. And there was a theater that was within walking distance of my house. It was a long walk. I mean, it was like a 45-minute walk, but I could get there. And so I would sneak out. I would walk to the theater, and I would watch movies. And so that's like the first time I saw Aliens, the first time I saw The Thing. It was walking to this theater. And when Predator came out, a bunch of people were talking about it at high school. They were like, oh, my God, it's the best movie ever. And I knew it had the guy from Terminator, and the first Terminator was absolutely my favorite movie at the time. And they were like, yeah, it has the dude from Terminator. He's in it. It's awesome. It's like he's fighting aliens. I'm like, well, I got to see that. So I snuck out. I walked up to the theater. I watched it. And then I like, it was fun. It was cool. I loved it. But then like, I kind of forgot about it. And then it was years later. And I had a friend who was a bit younger than me who had grown up with the same kind of crazy religious background. And he just had no history of cinema in him. Right. And so I was educating him on cinema. I was like, we'd go to the video store and I'd be like, this is Terminator. This is the most important sci-fi movie of all time. We're going to get this. This is Aliens. This is James Cameron's next movie. You know, like I was taking him through it. We're standing there and he was looking at the box for Predator. And he was like, is this any good? And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. I can't believe I forgot that one. We took it back. We watched Predator. I showed him Predator. And it just reignited my love for the movie. I'm like, I saw this when it came out and I forgot how awesome it was. And yeah. It's almost like I saw it the first time twice. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
I remember, so Predator's weird because I don't know how, you know, every time we've done a movie on this podcast, I remember being in the video store and seeing the cover of the thing and renting it. And then my first experience, you know, we were talking about Big Trouble in Little China later, and I was really just talking. You know, I can taste the Wendy's Frosty that I was eating when I was watching for the first time Big Trouble in Little China. But Predator is one of those things that I for whatever reason I learned about it through school with friends at school, and we would talk about movies, and they would tell me about this movie called The Predator, and it was, you know, maybe I was at my grandparents. I lived with my grandparents for a while, so maybe I was like living with them. But there was a blank spot. Somehow I did not see Predator. And you know, do you ever, when now you have YouTube, you have immediate access to everything, right? So curiosity doesn't exist anymore. But do you remember when you were younger and you would hear about a movie and you would just think about it for days, and then you would get bits and pieces from people? And I remember I'm like, wait a minute, it's an alien? They're like, yeah. And I felt like I pieced together the whole movie through stories and like the curiosity of it. And I remember just always wanting to see it. And I remember being at my mom's house, and this is when we were in Savannah, and the lady next door let my mom borrow some of her VHS tapes, and I knew there was an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie there, and I was like, oh my God, this is probably going to be Predator, but it was Commando. It wasn't Predator, and I watched, I was super into. Anyway, long story short, then I remember it hit the HBO, the rotation of HBO, and so then I watched it, and it was everything I dreamed it could be, but. You know, you would catch it at different times, right? So I would see bits and pieces. So it was a movie that I could never get a hold of because I heard about it. I've always wanted to see it. Then I would see it on HBO, and I'd catch the ending, or I'd catch the middle, or I'd catch the beginning. And then finally I got to sat down and watch the whole thing, and it lived up to the lore. And I almost think that it became more of a special movie to me because I longed for it for so long, and then when you get to see it,
it was your lost ark. You know,
it was like it was amazing. What's interesting, the whole premise of this movie came on a joke. There was a joke at Hollywood at the time because Rocky IV just come out, and Rocky beat up Dolph Lundgren, and that was 4. So at this point, he fought Apollo Creed 2 times. He fought Mr. T, and they just keep going up to where, you know, Dolph Lundgren's like a T-Man. And literally, he was He-Man.
Literally.
So the joke in Hollywood was like, who's Rocky going to fight now? An alien. And they were like, oh, that's interesting. You know, have a Rocky or an action star like that fight an alien. And so they came up, these two brothers, the Thomas brothers, came up with the idea of Predator and just wrote it off spec and somehow got it to Joe Silver. And that's how the whole thing kind of kicked off. And Arnold Schwarzenegger said he always wanted to do like a Magnificent Seven type of situation where there's a group of people working together, and that kicked off this the Predator movie.
It's so cool. I love how like these crazy iconic movies can just stem from this tiny little germ of an idea. Well, what's left except Rocky versus an alien? but it's wild. Like even like Back to the Future, you know, it's like I wonder what it'd be like to hang out with my dad when he was in high school, and look what that created. It's like all these tiny little germs. But that's really funny. I hadn't heard that before.
Brett, we talked a little bit about this when we talked earlier today, but horror action is some of my favorite movies. And I think that, you know, people talk about, you know, the superhero movies starting in the early 2000s and kind of like, you know, getting saturated with all these superhero movies. But we had our superheroes in the 80s. Rambo was a superhero. Commando was a superhero. And I always, and we talked about this a few times on the podcast, but I always go back to Chuck Norris movie Silent Rage. And at that time, Chuck Norris is making Mission in Action and all these movies where he just kicks everybody's ass through the whole movie, which is great, and I enjoy it. But Silent Rage is Chuck Norris fighting Michael Myers. And so the combination of this invincible supernatural thing that goes against your superhero at the time. And I remember at the end, Chuck Norris, like there's a fight where Chuck Norris is just knocking him down. And the guy gets up and he keeps coming back and he keeps coming back. And the guy's so big and strong. And you start to see Chuck Norris getting tired. And it was the first time that I seen like a Rambo or a Chuck Norris or them get tired. And it was terrifying. And so I love, it's like Kyle Reese in The Terminator. I love these supernatural, unstoppable forces going against that traditional 80s hero because they're the only things that make them vulnerable. They're the only things that you see. And within this movie, seeing these, you know, 7 of the baddest motherfuckers that are supposed to walk the planet are scared when Billy says, you know, I'm scared. And you're like, whoa, what? Yeah. The guy in 48 hours is scared? That guy's not scared of anything. And that really starts to get to you that this thing is there.
Well, and the first time, you know, Schwarzenegger's on screen with the Predator, and it's so much bigger than him. Right? I mean, he's the biggest, he's literally the biggest action star of that era in size, right? He's gigantic. And then the Predator stands up next to him and it's towering over him and its arms are bigger. And it's like, it looks like a 8-foot tall bodybuilder with an alien mask on. And you're like, it's just going to kick his ass. And then it does. And then it just starts kicking his ass. Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually one of the things that Predator and The Thing share in common that I've always really deeply loved was seeing these men that I'm supposed to see as superheroes terrified. Just echoing what you already said. Like that's what hit me the most when I watched Predator the first time was like, dang, you're taking guys who couldn't be more equipped physically, couldn't be more equipped technologically, couldn't be more equipped strategically, who are now all stripped down to nothing, and you see them either get killed or terrified. And, you know, it's similar with The Thing, where I was like, this is a different experience for me. These are always, because when I was younger, especially, I'm thinking like, these guys all look like my dad that I would run to in this situation, but dad's freaking out. And if dad's freaking out, I'm in a lot of trouble. You know what I mean?
So, you know, in the opening, they have that, we talked about this a long time, Ty. In The Thing, you see the space shuttle come to Earth, and in the opening, the space shuttle comes. Again, this is a studio note. I don't know why they feel the need to do this. I find that, now, you know, as a kid, though, I will say watching it, it's like, oh, ooh, what is that? You know, and then the spaceship comes and it comes down the Earth. But in terms of the setup of the story, which is a great setup. You've been pushing too many pencils, Dylan, and they have the
Dylan, what's the matter? Have you pushing too many pencils?
and Arnold Schwarzenegger has perfected arm acting. Like his arms are flexed in every scene. They're oiled and tanned and flexed in every. Even when he does military signals, he's like, poof, poof, like doing the thing like that.
Hey, John Mctiernan, is this going to be one of those shots with my arm in it?
Hey, and let's shout out a little respect to Carl Weathers, who got gigantic for this movie.
Gigantic. Weathers, did you see Rocky 2?
Oh no, I've seen Rocky 2. Rocky 2, he's like a boxer build in Rocky 2, right? He's got a great build. He must have spent 6 months in the gym getting ready for Predator because he has never been that big. Like he got gigantic for that movie.
I actually think he's more ripped than anybody on The Thing. You know, Arnold
he's shredded like a julienne salad.
But they have these, they have all these stories that they would have these 5:30 a.m. workouts, and then it started getting competitive, so then it turned into 5 a.m. then it turned into 4 a.m. because it was like they were so competitive. There's that famous story, and this is the 80s to me, right? This is 80s machismo. Arnold Schwarzenegger told the wardrobe lady for who was the wrestler's name in there?
Jesse Ventura.
Jesse Ventura. Yeah. They told him. He says, tell them that your arms are bigger than mine, 1 inch bigger than mine. And so Jesse was so pumped. And then Arnold was in the gym working out, and he goes, hey, my arms are bigger than yours. And he goes, all right, I bet you. He goes, oh yeah, I heard. He goes, I bet you a bottle of champagne. Mine is bigger. Of course, Arnold's arms are bigger, and so he had to give him a bottle of champagne.
It's like 3 inches bigger. Yeah.
How is this different than showing each other your dick? You know
it's not.
Right.
No, it absolutely.
Where is that? Why don't we just cut to that point?
We're measuring dicks right there.
That was the story that they didn't tell.
Yeah. Let's just go straight to it to do the thing.
My favorite Carl Weathers anecdote was when he was talking about how all the guys were working out like crazy, and he wanted everyone to think that he was naturally big, and so he kept kind of hanging back and waiting till they were done with their workouts to go sneak his in, so they'd never see him in the gym. Brilliant.
And I bet it pissed him off too, because Carl Weathers, he looked like Adonis on there. Do you guys understand the setup, like the whole moment, the whole opening scene, what their object is, and what they're trying to do, and explain that to me?
Of course I do.
Okay.
Yeah. No. So Carl Weathers, the CIA man, is ostensibly sending Arnold's team to go rescue some American hostages. That the American helicopter's been shot down, that it has these CIA operatives on it, that they're being held by these guerrillas who are threatening to kill them or hold them hostage or whatever. And he's like, you're going to go in, you're going to rescue these Americans, and you're going to get them out. But what he's really doing, his secret agenda is that he knows that these guerrillas hiding up in the mountains have intelligence, information that the CIA wants. So he's sending them in supposedly on a rescue mission, but his secret agenda is Arnold's team will kill or displace all the guerrillas, and then Carl Weathers can go get all their intelligence out. Yeah.
So but you cooked up a story and dropped us in a meat grinder.
That's right. He knows Arnold would not agree to that mission.
Why?
So he cooks up the story that it's about hostages.
So I understand all of this up to that point. What I don't understand is when Arnold says to him, and he's made the point too, like, I'm not a killer, we're a rescue or whatever. He says, I don't do this sort of thing. He was angry, but I don't understand that, because Arnold saw the hostage get killed, and then they slaughtered everybody. And then he was like, I don't do this sort of thing. But would it have been different? They're still there to rescue the hostages.
Yeah, that is a little less clear. My belief is, having seen the movie 6,000 times, my belief is that the last guys to go steal this intel, and I think that's supposed to be the idea, that they've been tricked by being sold this story about innocent hostages being killed, when in reality it's just CIA teams trying to get this intel from these guerrillas. Mm-hmm. It's really fuzzy logic. It's very fuzzy, but you don't need it to be razor sharp, because that's not what the movie's about.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's my point.
I described the opening of the movie as waiting for the predator to show up. Like guys walking until the predator shows up.
But from a filmmaking standpoint, it's incredibly important, that opening scene, because we need to see our 7 guys kick ass. We need to see our 7 guys be unstoppable, which they are. They wipe out that entire camp of guerrillas, and they barely take a scratch, right? Because they ain't even got time to bleed. Right. And if we don't see that moment, if we don't see them do that, then when the predator shows up and crushes them, we have no context, right? So I think that opening is really important.
Like seeing these guys, these superheroes, doing their superheroics in order to tear them all apart.
It's why all this stuff is why the Avengers Infinity War works. It's because we've been watching the Avengers kick everyone's ass for 5 movies now. Then Thanos comes up and body slams the Hulk. And you're like, whoa, what the fuck, right? This is that. Yeah. This is 7 guys who kill everything that gets in front of them, and we're like, oh, they're invincible. then Predator shows up and starts body slamming them, and we're like, oh, this is a next level thing.
It's awesome too how scary it makes the Predator. Like it just only adds to the horror of it all. Like you're just like, wait, what?
I kind of like how they try to shoehorn some story in there, some arcs, but you can tell they don't really care about it because Carl Weathers has this little bit of turn at the end where he's going to go after the guy. And you're like, why? What? What are you doing? He's like, I guess I picked up some bad habits. It's like, oh, you learned a lesson in this thing and this is where you're turning? Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, he doesn't do those kind of jobs. Well, he seemed pretty damn natural at slaughtering the whole village. It wasn't like he had glee, and it wasn't like he had any hesitation. It wasn't like, I got to do this. It was like, brrr! And I love, here's the thing. Here's a question. Would Arnold Schwarzenegger be the movie star he is if it wasn't the 80s? Would he be a movie star that he is in any other decade?
Created him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
In any other decade.
I agree, because I don't know if it was necessarily his acting that ever really got him jobs, Right. But it's funny to think of a guy that hates this job but can still tell a guy to stick around after he just stabbed him to a wall. It's like, I don't like doing this, but I couldn't resist saying that one.
And, I feel that is almost, so a lot of his movies have that tongue-in-cheek kind of self-aware humor to it. That seemed out of place because this movie's dead serious.
You're absolutely right. I think that every time I see it, where I'm like, because even his other lines, like, I ain't got time to bleed is so quotable, but it's not funny. It's not even tongue in cheek. Like, it's just Blaine being his crazy self. Like, everything is so sincere. You're right. That's the only line where it's just like, he might as well look to the camera and just be like, stick around. Yes, you're right.
And coincidentally, I think this is the best Arnold's been besides the original Terminator. Like, I really enjoy him in this movie.
I disagree. Arnold's masterpiece, Arnold's tour de force is Conan. That's the best Arnold has ever been, is Conan.
That's fair, because he's amazing in Conan.
The genius of Conan is they give him very few lines.
Yeah.
The genius of Conan, it's him, it's just him, and Arnold has always been a great physical actor.
Yeah.
Like, he's great with his physicality. He knows how to present himself to the camera. He knows how to move, right? And so the genius of that movie is just be you, and we're going to give you very little to say. And he's great.
The reason I do agree this is one of his best to me is because if not his best, is so many of his movies, he's just kind of like the semi-truck just blasting through the story, And which in Terminator is terrifying, and his other, like I think about Commando, it's like he's just blazing through this thing, and don't get in his way. But in Predator, and again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about seeing these guys being threatened and afraid, Arnold in the third act of Predator is phenomenal. Like when he's desperate to survive, he's kind of panicking, and then you're seeing him like covered in mud, kind of strategizing. Right? You see him like building the traps, and I actually believe him that he doesn't know if he's going to beat this thing. Mm-hmm. And it's a side of Arnold you're not used to seeing, because it's also, I'm sure, not popular for the action hero guys to want to play someone who's losing. Yeah. But it's so, the drama of it is so powerful, and it's all on his shoulders. Like, he's not even talking a whole lot. So much of the end of the movie is just his grunting, hiding, holding his breath, trying not to die.
Yeah, it's so much more than that, because it's very specific. There's intentions to what he's, and at the end, he makes that decision where it's going to be me and this guy, and I'm here and I'm alone, and I'm going to give everything I got. I got one advantage. He can't see me, and I'm going to use this advantage.
Yeah.
And that primal scream at the end, that thing, like, and when he's screaming, it's almost going back to Billy when he cut his chest, and he's like, we're going to die. This is how I'm going to have a dignified death. I'm going to die like a warrior.
Yeah.
And so when he does that primal scream, like, come and get it, I feel that he believes that he might not make it out of this, that he might not survive, but he's going to give it his whole thing. Yeah. And to me, that's why I think that this is the best I've seen him in this movie. And he's good at comedy, like straight comedy, like Twins and thing. He was really funny in that. But this one,
yeah, and of course, should have gotten an Oscar for Batman and Robin, but this is a close second for sure.
The end of Predator, that last act of Predator with him fighting the Predator, has the same advantage the same thing I love about Conan is they don't give him a bunch of lines to say. It's just his physical acting, and that's what he's so good at. So the last bit of Predator leans into the very best thing Arnold can do. So of course it's great. Yeah,
true. I also think a lot of it is, I mean, this blew my mind. I didn't know this until recently, but this is John McTiernan's first studio movie. Like, he only did one movie before this. I always, in the timeline that I play this out in my head, he always did Die Hard first.
Right.
But I don't know why, just the way I computed it, I just always assumed that. And the fact that this was his first studio movie, and, you know, John Carpenter was like a theater guy. Like, he's like an actor's director, you know? And I feel like there are some incredible performance. Yeah, John McTiernan. This is a movie about soldiers fighting an alien. You wouldn't expect to go see great acting, but all these guys are performing top tier, like across the board. Like, you see them in other movies in like the 80s, like everyone's good, of course, but like there's some great performances in this movie.
Bill Duke is fantastic in this.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And Sonny Landon's really good. And Sonny Landon had like a spiritual connection and knowing before anybody else knows. And when Arnold goes over there with his gun, with his arm flexed the whole time, and when he walks over there and Billy's just looking out in the woods, and he says, "Do you see it?" And Arnold doesn't, and then he's like, "All right, let's go." Like, but it's like he's alone in it. He knows it's there, and he carries that burden as he's going because he's connected, you know. And he does a great job with that.
Almost.
Yeah, and when he says he's scared, you're like, this guy's never been scared a day in his life. There's no way. Yeah. Did y'all hear the story about him that they had to hire a bodyguard for him on set, not to protect him, but to protect other people from him because he loses his temper so much?
What is his reputation? Is that what his reputation was? He's just bad-tempered?
It had to be because, you know, I remember when I saw him first time in 48 Hours, and I was like, this guy is so interesting to me, and I'm going to watch this guy in anything he does. And they would at least would have given him a shot, but I heard like he was just like would just go out of his mind. There's this famous story that he was like at a club when they were shooting Predator, and he was like on the ground of the dance floor licking people's ankles.
What?
Yeah, this was the 80s, man. These were these characters like existed.
You got cute ankles. I was thinking like how Jean-Claude Van Damme must feel with the success of Predator, like after walking away from the movie.
So there's so many stories about this, and I don't know which one we're going to go in with. There's one that he got fired because he was too short. There's one that he wanted to like do karate and kickboxing in the suit. And they're like, this guy, the Predator's from another planet. He's not from a dojo from another planet. He doesn't have those kind of moves. Gosh. And then there's the one that
Predator suddenly does like splits in between trees and just like sits there.
That would have been a different movie. By the way, he's 5'9", and so it would.
Oh my gosh!
It wouldn't have been as an intimidating experience. But I would like to know the stories of what that was about. And in '87, was Bloodsport already out? Like, was he a star at this point?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think Bloodsport came out after that.
Okay, so this was probably and one thing he really didn't like that you can't see his face too when you're doing the thing.
That wouldn't have helped the Predator either. I wanted to do kung fu, and can it just be my face?
Then
guys, there's a guy in the jungle trying to kill us.
The movie where it's Predator, except that it's just Jean-Claude Van Damme running around karate kicking dudes
with his tan buttocks.
That would be amazing. Now I want to see that movie.
It's just Jean-Claude Van Damme running around. I don't know. I'm just a guy. I live in the jungle. I found a way to like cloak myself and look almost invisible. It's just kind of cool.
I just love when people come in the jungle because then I just karate kick them.
I think it's an interesting choice that they cast Shane Black. So has Shane Black done anything since this as an actor?
I don't think he did anything before this.
No,
and he did do a movie after this.
Which one?
Dead Heat.
Oh my God!
Did he act in Dead Heat? Oh my! Wow.
Wow.
No, he was a cop and he got killed right away.
Oh. Wasn't it kind of a situation like Carl Gottlieb in Jaws, where he was brought in to act so that they had him on set creatively as a writer?
Yeah, that's what they wanted to do. And then he was on set. He's like, no, I'm an actor. I'm acting on this. I'm not writing on this. And then so they killed him 7 minutes in. So they killed him to do it 7 minutes in.
Because that's always so fascinating to me how like Carl Gottlieb did that on Jaws. Like he acted so that he could help like kind of lead improvisations and kind of help with scripts and stuff on the day. And I always kind of figured Shane Black they must have hoped he was doing something similar. And then he was like, no, I'm an actor.
It's just crazy to me that he just wrote Lethal Weapon, big movie, and then he's going to go be an actor and do this one-time thing and not write on it, I wonder if those jokes in the helicopter were his writing, because they're what's aged the worst about the movie.
The worst. Yeah. I know. It's the one part of the movie, like I showed it to my son. My son's 14 and he wanted to watch Predator, and I was 14 when I saw it for the first time. So I was like, okay, I have to, you're the right age, because I guess I'm a hypocrite if I disagree that you're not. But that's the one part that I kind of skipped through. I was like, you can hear the Tyrannosaurus Rex line, but then right past
the filthy habit line.
He did say, though, Shane Black said that ended up being his only contribution to the script was what he did there on set with the jokes,
which was terrible.
Which aged the worst, absolutely. Maybe don't add those next time.
Or what else is aged the worst is military tactics. At that point, they talk about this being a military movie. Shane Black, he's running with his HK-94, and he's holding it by the stock and by the thing like this, like open palms, like a kid, like with a toy gun, and the gun is pointing under his jaw, and he's kind of running through. He runs to the forest and leans up against a tree like this. And these guys are supposed to be commandos. Like they're supposed to be. And the reality is this is more Western than military, because military would be unified. They'd be moving as one organism, as a group. But this is Western. This is individuality. This is when you meet the cast, each one is wearing a different outfit. Each one has a different personality. It's all about their individuals.
They all have different guns.
And they walk through the woods like they're golfing, like they're just strolling, and they shoot their guns from their hip. They all shoot their guns from the hip. They're more concerned about the way their muscles look than the actual shooting of the guns. And there's zero, they'll try to do some stealth, like when they went on the guys that were crawling down the hill. And then when it was wartime, they just stand up and they're just mowing people down, just going through the thing. And what I love about Commando is there's literally 30 minutes of Arnold holding a gun with the ammo right here from his waist and just walking through like the Terminator, and people shoot at him, and then and then it cuts to the guy exploding and falling over, and then and that guy exploding and falling over. It just for 30 minutes of seeing that.
It is funny to think like we need a stealth team. So we're going to hire 6 of the biggest guys possible to go crunch through this forest.
I mean, Bill Duke is stealthy, though. Like, he slips back. Yeah. You ghosted us, motherfucker. You give away our position one more time, I'm going to slip back and bleed you real quiet. See? He's stealthy.
Yeah.
So true. That's true.
I will say the whole trophy aspect and the whole lure of Predator is really interesting. And the fact that he hangs them up and he skins them and hangs them up in trees, and he keeps the skulls as his trophies, and them seeing these trophies and having that moment of when they see the chopper that's in the tree and they say what happened in this, and Billy says they were shooting in all different directions, but I don't see any tracks. And what's really scary is when they have that moment of just blazing into the jungle and the woods, and it's that same situation. They're just shooting in the jungle and there's no tracks. But I also love that they're shooting in the woods and nobody asks any questions. Nobody tries to see where they just run up and line up next to him and just start shooting too. Yep. Both guns,
where are we throwing
grenades. There's nobody's shooting back. They're just and they clear out the whole jungle.
Now, so a friend of mine who was in the army in Vietnam, he said that used to happen. But that was because it was a bunch of 19-year-old knuckleheads. If one guy started shooting in a direction, everybody else would just start shooting in that direction without asking or checking. Just like, oh, he saw something, we must all shoot that way. But that's 19-year-olds with M16s who are terrified. And like, they're just, one guy shoots, everybody just starts shooting. He said that used to happen all the time. That is not behavior you would expect from like SEAL Team 6, right? That's not behavior you would expect from like top flight commandos, right?
And I don't know if this was by design. I love, the whole Jaws thing where you don't see Predator, but when you do finally see the Predator, it really pays off. He delivers. Yeah. But there's something about the kills. They're so stealthy and violent, and sometimes it looks like something's cutting, and then you see sparks of this thing shooting. It's like he has all these different ways of killing people, and it's violent and it's raw and it's rough. What were your favorite kills in the movie?
I think the most surprising moment in the movie is the death of Blaine, because you have seen these guys be such badasses, and Blaine is so big and so intimidating and so heavily armed, and he seems like one of the guys who's going to be the last to go, and he's just standing there, and suddenly his entire like chest cavity is removed. It's just gone. Yeah, and he
seems like he's the biggest guy with the biggest weapon, and then it's like, oh, he's gone now.
There's such a finality to it, because like a guy gets shot, you will die of being shot, but it's like a little hole, and you're like, oh, maybe he could live, maybe they could do surgery, maybe they could like stop the bleeding or whatever. This injury is so massively traumatic that there's no question he's dead. There's like no way you could ever survive that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like so surprising when it happens, because he's just hollowed out. And once that happens, from then on, you're like, oh, if you get hit by this thing, you just die. There's no, maybe I'll make it. Hope. There's no hope. Yeah, well, that one for me is the most surprising.
The most horrific thing I had seen, like when I watched Predator, other than when Blaine's chest exploded, was when Carl Weathers got his arm blown off, and it has like that slow-mo shot. It hasn't aged necessarily the greatest, but watching it happens. But then rather than cutting away, it has like that slow-mo shot of him like just yelling, like spinning, and his arm just like blown off. That felt like the most horrific thing I'd ever seen in my life up until that point. I was like, oh no, which only just made me more terrified of what was going to happen next.
I have a question. Was it established that Bill Duke and Jesse Ventura were best friends? Because there's that moment where the horns are playing and Arnold says, he goes, he was a good soldier. And he goes, he was my friend. And then,
they actually, if you watch it, they do a good job with that, because there's an earlier
There's
scene.
A moment when he gives him a drink of his drink, and they have a conversation about the jungle being hot. But there's not that level of friendship that's established between them.
But I think that scene actually does do a nice job with that. That scene where they're standing there, and he says, this is some badass bush. It makes Cambodia look like a theme park, whatever. And you get that. That scene always gives me a sense. These two guys were in Vietnam together, right? He says this makes Cambodia look like, and he hands him the drink, and he takes the drink of it. I'm like, oh, these guys have been at war together for decades, right? That scene really sets that up for me. It feels like it.
I didn't get it because they're always referencing through the whole thing, Cambodia, Indonesia, all the battles that they've been to and done. And so there was a moment where they had a drink. What it feels like to me is Bill Duke saying, listen, what am I doing here? What is my, like, what is motivating me at this point? And he's saying, how about this? How about when they take out, Jesse Ventura, him and I have this relationship, this friend. It feels a bit shoehorned to me. And, all of a sudden the horns are playing and this thing, and he says, he was a good soldier. He was my friend. And he says, him and I got a score to settle. And then that was kind of, the vengeance was kind of on his thing. So, and I understand what you're saying. I just felt like it felt a bit shoehorned to me. And it's like knowing the nature of where that scene could have came from makes a lot of sense to me. But Bill Duke's head getting exploded in drenching the camera was a good death.
Yeah, that was
go time.
That was nuts.
You don't have a lot of time in a script like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a movie that is moving as quickly as this one does, you don't have a lot of time for setup scenes. But I really feel like that one scene of the two of them talking about their past, sharing the drink, that's about as much time as a script like this is going to give you to set up a relationship like that. And what I respect about that moment is it's all indirect. Nobody said, like, the worst version of that scene is the one where, hey, Bill Duke, remember when we were in Vietnam together and we had this tight relationship? Remember that? Oh yeah, I do remember that. You're my best friend. All right, let's survive this jungle, right? What I love about that scene is to me, that's the best version of that, where it's just a quiet moment with two guys sharing a drink, and one of them says, this is some scary jungle that we're in. It's worse than Cambodia. And the other goes, yeah, it's worse than Cambodia. To me, that's the best version of that kind of scene, because I get the sense these guys were in Cambodia together and they're sharing a quiet drink, and it implies so much history without stating it outright. So I get what you're saying.
I must have been going to the bathroom when that scene hit, because I don't remember I remember specifically something like that happening, but because I remember when him saying he was my friend, I remember being like, what? And I was like, all I remember is Jesse offering him chewing tobacco in the helicopter, and he says, get that nasty shit away from me.
And then fast forward to, you're my best friend.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's like, he was my friend. And I was like, and then, if that moment was there, maybe I just missed it. Maybe I was,
and it may be that. So I have been accused in my own writing of sometimes being overly subtle.
No, so I'm a believer in that. I'm not. Yeah. If it's written the way you said it is, I would. Yeah.
If you rewatch that scene, from my perspective as a writer, as a screenwriter, I love that scene because it implies more than it states, and I'm always trying to find ways to imply rather than state. So I really like that scene.
I actually feel like, because I agree with you, Ty. Like that scene. It's the combination of the implication in the dialogue and the performance, where it feels more like an eavesdropping on two guys that are friends who are speaking to each other, knowing everything they don't have to say, right? And then I'm more feeling it. But that's actually, I mean, you also bring up one, my favorite thing about the movie is that it leans so heavy on implication across the board. Because like the bad version, if this movie got made today, I feel like the studio note would be that one of the soldiers needed to be a scientist. Yep. And halfway through, he'd go, hey, guys, I've been running a sample on that glowing blood we found earlier. And it turns out that this might be a species from this planet who's trailing, and just like kind of just laid everything out in a real silly way. But this movie really trusts the audience to, like you were saying earlier, Wes, like as we're watching Predator hunt, and his process, no one's watching, only us, just us, the audience. Like no one's sitting there studying it going, hey guys, I think I've seen what this thing wants. Arnold doesn't even know until he's physically going fist to fist with the alien at the end of the movie and kind of starts figuring it all out. I love that it's just presenting all the pieces, but that's it. We don't actually know anything about the Predator until part 2. But by that point, the mystery's already gone anyways, so that's the time to do it, right? But
and to your point, to see the studio note version of Predator, you just have to watch The Predator, the Shane Black one that came out a few years ago. That is the studio note version of Predator because, hey, this movie's too dour. We need more comedy. Well, what if it's 7 crazy people rather than 7 badass commandos? Well, we need to know more about the Predator. What if one of the people traveling with them is a scientist who's like, guys, my science tells me that this is going on. Like that whole movie plays like the studio note version of Predator. And
it really does. You're right.
I absolutely 100% agree with you, Brett. I didn't know that until you said it, but the minute you said that, I'm like, oh my God, that's what the Predator is. It's the studio note version of Predators. Yep.
That is so funny, but you're right. Because it's just so confident and assured. And it reminds me of, I mean, Wes knows this about me, but like, I'm just a diehard fan of Twilight Zone. And what's so amazing about Twilight Zone in that era of horror writers, Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont and like all this, like so much of it was, this stuff is happening, and that's it. There is a reason. You're going to get glimpses of it. Maybe someone will figure it out. Maybe someone won't. We're giving you everything you need to piece together something, but that's not how the world works. The world doesn't always tie it up in a bow. And sometimes, like in the case of this movie, I love how it's like, I just got to not die. I'm not quite so concerned about all the why so much as the just don't die part of it. And it taps into something that really freaks me out. It shares in common with Alien, where like so much of the horror of Alien is this bizarre stuff going on that we don't have time to fully figure out. And it doesn't actually make a ton of sense, but that's kind of why it's freaky. I don't know how Predator can cloak, just like I don't know why an alien has to put a face hugger on your face and then gestate before it pops out of your stomach. I just know that it happened and it's terrifying me, and now it's after me, and I just have to keep ahead of it. And both of those movies prey on like just the horror of just the absurdity and insanity of something that defies explanation happening, and you only have time to piece together what you can to not die. And I love that.
So you're a director. I'm sure you've gotten many studio notes. Let me tell you my least favorite studio note. The worst studio note you can get, and every bad executive will use this note on you, which is, we need the stakes to be bigger. So what you just said was the stakes of Predator, the stakes of Alien are, I need to just not die. That's the only stakes, right? Is a thing is trying to kill me. I need to not die. So everything I'm going to do from now on is to try to keep the thing from killing me, right?
Yeah.
I know for a fact if you made Predator today, if that script was being developed, you would get the note, the stakes need to be big. Can they discover that the Predator plans to destroy the whole Earth? And they have to defeat it. I was just
going to say.
They have to defeat it so that it won't destroy the Earth. Then we need bigger stakes. That's the note you would get.
You read my mind. As soon as you start saying that, oh God, that's exactly what it'd be. What if they're trying to, okay, we like what you're doing. Yes, they don't want to die, but maybe while they're trying to survive, they glimpse that there's a plot to destroy the planet. And so now they have to stop him. It's like, no, God, oh my God. But that also harkens back to what is so great about this movie is the simplicity and the confidence of it. And we don't get as much of that these days. Like just daring to stay simple.
Because when you're done watching this movie, you're laying in bed at night and thinking about what is that thing and what is it, and you start to put together in your imagination, and there's just little things about him collecting the skull. I thought it was interesting when he kills, when Billy and them have their show off, that's the one kill they don't show. You just hear the scream.
Yeah.
And then for that, because Billy challenges him and he rips the spinal cord in the head, that's all you see, and it's almost like his trophy because he was like fully challenged in a combat situation like that. One of my favorite, we talk about this all the time, but by far my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street is the beginning, because it is the mystery of this thing that is invading her dreams. And this thing, she finds a diary of her mother and starts connecting that it was this sexual predator that lived on this block and was murdered. And as you're kind of uncovering all of these things, it's so much more terrifying than all the other Freddy Kruegers where you see him and he's joking and doing all that. That's when it's still living off the momentum of how good that first movie was. And people are trying to get that same juice again. But also what I loved about Nightmare on Elm Street, which brings us to the third act of this movie, is one of the things that I love about when, Nightmare on Elm Street, you're like, you're fucked, man. There's this guy invades your dreams. He has control of that dream world. What are you going to do? But she figures out a way. She uses she figures out, she takes the hat back and she's like, I can take him back to reality and I can hurt him. And she has all these booby traps and everything. So she starts to take agency and command over this. And that's my favorite thing. And so in the third act, when Arnold Schwarzenegger is like, if he bleeds, we can hurt him. And everybody makes it the chopper and he says, I'm going to do my last stand here, but I'm going to do it fighting. And he sets up these traps. And you got this mysterious thing in the jungle that is overmatched. Arnold Schwarzenegger is overmatched. He slaughtered these other commandos that are big and strong. The only thing is he has a little bit of a weapon on his side where he can't be seen anymore, which you need that thing. And he creates all these booby traps and he brings this guy, he pushes Arnold to his very limits, intellectually, physically, everything that he has. And he ultimately wins, but it's a deserved win, and you don't know if he's going to win.
Well, it's that amazing moment where he's covered in the mud for the first time, because that's what I think we also take for granted a lot because how familiar we are with the movie is that none of the soldiers have seen the heat vision we've seen the whole movie, right? And so it's like he has no clue until that moment when he's covered in the mud that the predator can't see him, and that realization, all of a sudden he has a power. This thing has had no discernible weakness, and in that one moment, it's like that moment with Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street where he started to go like, oh, he might have figured it out. I think he figured it out. That's brilliant.
That first bow and arrow shot when he hits the predator and explodes and the predator screams in pain and he bleeds, it's like so satisfying.
So good.
This is just occurring to me right now because of this conversation, but maybe that's why we love the Predator so much and maybe that's why the three of us all love horror movies so much, is horror movies are the one genre that's allowed to still be simple. They're allowed to be simple. Like, it's Halloween. Michael Myers is a big, scary, crazy guy who broke out of an asylum and he's murdering people in his hometown. That's it. The stakes are, I live in the town where Michael Myers is murdering people and he's trying to murder me. The entire stakes are, I just need to be alive at the end of the movie. And horror movies are allowed to do that. They're allowed to. Yeah. And Predator plays like a horror movie in that way that
absolutely
the Predator is Michael Myers. Schwarzenegger is Jamie Lee Curtis. I just need to be alive at the end of this movie. And like she makes the weapon out of the hangers and stabs him with it. It's Schwarzenegger going, oh, he can't see me if I have mud on my body, so I'm going to put mud all over my body. And then I'm going to see if that is enough to help me win. That simplicity. Yeah.
It's structurally, you're so right. Like it structurally shares way more in common with horror movies than it does with sci-fi movies, for sure.
Slasher specifically.
Like it's way more of a final girl story.
Yeah.
Casting the final girls Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I also feel like what I love about this is that, so I also rediscovered Predator 2 because my son, after he saw Predator 1, was like, oh my God, there's a second one. I'm like, let's watch it. I never hated Predator 2, but it was never, Predator 1 is so vastly superior for me personally that I don't visit it a lot. So I probably hadn't seen it in like maybe 10, 15 years. And when I watched with him, I was like, this movie is actually so much better than I remember. But just from a writing standpoint, I love the fact that all the mystery of what the heck is this thing from the first movie doesn't exist anymore because there's a 2 now in the title and we've seen the Predator before. But then now we can expound on the mythology and pay off some of the clues and give you some of the explanation that we didn't give you in the first one. Because like when you talk, Wes, about like how he has the skulls, we don't know what he does with those. But then, the end of Predator 2 and the ship where you see the collection of skulls, like we know exactly what that means. Like I'm just looking at it and I know. No one needs to say a word. The movie starts to answer all the questions that the first movie asked, which to me starts to kind of feel like the best formula for a horror movie like this. Like if you just focus so much on the insanity and the horror of what's happening and just don't die. If you have to make a sequel, maybe that's the time to start answering any of the questions that you didn't feel like you needed to answer the first time, but the audience is back, so why not have the conversation now?
These movies like Nightmare on Elm Street or the first Halloween, they have so much power and mystery and they work so well that all these sequels are living off of that. Like they're the momentum of that, and they're doing these things, and they're just not as interesting. But if you see Predator in the title, you still remember the first time you felt when you first saw that Predator movie. Yeah, and then I'm gonna watch the new one, probably tomorrow. But I like that director.
It's great, by the way.
Oh wow, good.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it.
It takes the story back to a simple place.
That's really cool. To Wes, your point, your interest to see it is because of the first one. Like the affection, the economy of your affection is built up from the first one so much that that's what you're spending on the sequels, right? Is loving the first one. But I did hear that about this new one, Prey, that it really does kind of evoke a lot of the heart and soul of the original movie, which is rad.
Well, I feel like that director, I'm drawing a blank on his name, the guy that has done the new one. Yeah, I feel like he has a lot of potential, and I feel like he hasn't really had the right material to swing with. But I think he's going to have a big future ahead of him.
He directed my favorite episode of Black Mirror, the one with
which one?
Kurt Russell's son, Wyatt Russell.
Oh yeah. Would it be your favorite if Kurt Russell's Offspring wasn't in it?
Well, I don't want to imagine that version of
it. If we become the John Carpenter Kurt Russell team, I would definitely be the poor man Kurt Russell and that thing, but I'd be proud to take it. Joseph, we have a top 5.
Hack Burton.
So, Brett, what the top 5 is like whatever we're inspired. The top 5 is usually inspired by what we're talking about. If we're doing an episode of Expanse, we'll do. And so this is which one is this one, Joseph?
Top 5 80s testosterone films.
80s testosterone films.
Oh man,
the 80s is made out of testosterone, man.
Yep.
You don't have Conan. Oh, you do at the bottom.
Yeah.
Lone Wolf McQuade.
Oh my God! When I was a kid, I fucking loved Lone Wolf McQuade.
I loved Lone Wolf. So first of all, Die Hard is in the 0 spot. So we picked Die Hard for every top 5
top of the list. Yeah.
If it could be the top 5 love story, Die Hard's at the top of the list.
Yep.
Definitely Christmas movies.
I will say Rocky IV is not a movie that I love, but Rocky IV is maybe one of the most testosterone filled movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, there's a lot of buttercream on that one.
For sure.
Predator is up there, obviously.
Pretty big. I mean, dang.
Running Man. I love the Running Man.
And I don't think of Terminator as a testosterone movie, even though it has Schwarzenegger in it.
Same. Yeah. I don't either.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going pure testosterone for me, it's Predator, Rocky IV, Commando. Those are all pure testosterone.
What about Conan?
Well, so here's the thing with Conan is, yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger is like juiced to the gills and he's the size of like a building, right? But nobody else is. Right? I mean, like his buddy Subotai is played by Jerry Lopez. It's just he's like a little surfer dude, right? I mean, if
we're going through that criteria, I think Bloodsport's got to go on that top 5.
Bloodsport is pretty testosterone-y.
That's pretty testosterone.
I was going to say Bloodsport's definitely on the list in my opinion.
And there's a lot of skin butter in that too. Die Hard.
It's just the title.
Oh, Bolo, the Chinese actor who played a lot of played a lot of heavies, who had the pecs that he would do the dancing pecs.
He would do the he did that in like 4 movies.
Yeah.
Die Hard, Rocky IV, Predator, Commando, Running Man, and Bloodsport.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And we probably, Joseph, we probably didn't have time to get the Patreon list to see how we did, right?
We didn't even have one since we just came up with this today. So it's all good.
I know. All right, cool. I literally emailed him the topic like a minute before we started. So great. Well, listen, Brett, this was awesome. It's always fun to hang out with you. Hopefully we can come back again. Maybe there's a Carpenter movie you want to come back and talk about before we finish the Carpenter series. Thank you guys for hanging out. This was a great time. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.
Welcome back to Tying That Guy.